Hey, I want to thank you all for coming to our class today. And we have guest speaker from Ithaca, New York, Michael Lewis. And I am so excited to have Michael. And I have admired his work really before he was even Michael Lewis, if that makes any sense. In the early days in San Francisco, there was a photo magazine called Photo Metro that had a big cult following. And I remember myself, and I think it was like in the 90s, maybe, I submitted work there. I remember I was very excited that it got published. And in that issue were these very kind of haunting, curious, and kind of voyeuristic photographs, and they were by Michael Lewis. And then over the years, I followed his career, and he always fascinated me because his editorial portraits, and busy editorial photographer during the golden age of magazines.
Certainly was.
Yeah, which is no longer.
No more.
His work was always special, and it had that quality where you knew a Michael Lewis photograph immediately when you opened the magazine. There was no question. And then myself as a working photographer, I could never figure out what his pictures had that I couldn't grasp myself. And I think as a photographer, jealousy fuels you, and it makes you pay attention to what other people are doing. And Michael's work was always that kind of touch point, for me. So I'm so excited to have him here.
I should say equally, I started shooting commercially in San Francisco. I left grad school in 96, started shooting 97. I feel like I was aware of you right away, Timothy. And me and you have been, we've never actually physically met, but we've been on this very similar trajectory, similar clients, different styles. But yet I could see us having been put up for the same job.
Oh yeah.
There was the same kind of sense of humanity that the two of us kind of, I think, tapped into with portraiture.
No, so. I would agree. Because you, as a working photographer, you do pay attention to the people who are doing what you do. And usually you're able to poke holes in those in others, and then, kind of bow down to others, who are in the same field as well. And so, an interesting thing that I did for my class here is I had every student try to write an introduction to you. And they did great kind of introductions where they kind of researched you and then wrote something. And so let's see, Rachel Steele, are you here? Can you read your introduction? Because I thought it was so kind of whimsical and accurate and on
target. The only way I can see all you guys is if I'm not in this mode, so.
Okay, absolutely. Let me pull that up right here, Professor. And here we go. Michael Lewis is a commercial and editorial photographer based out of Los Angeles, California. He has spent the last 2 decades creating a beautiful body of work as a celebrity portrait artist and advertising guru. Lewis has a talent of constructing beautiful and comfortable images of highly recognizable subjects that gives you a chance to see past the celebrity persona and view the person themselves. There's an ease to his beautifully lit environmental photographs that calmly transforms luxury into a casual affair. His work brings a candid maturity that speaks for this master photographer. As you can see with his self-portraiture and personal projects, Lewis is as comfortable in front of the lens as he is behind it. Whether it is a bar of soap, himself in a phone booth, or a famous actor, his captures have a story to tell. And what a wonderful, inviting, and clever read it is.
That was great. That was great. Hey, thank you for that.
I'll take it. The only thing I would argue is I wish I could say I was more of an advertising guru just because of the cash that advertising pays. Other than that, I'll agree with everything. Thank you.
You got to believe your own press at times,
Yeah. On that note, I'll say something. One of the most valuable things that was ever said to me in grad school, a guy named Nayland Blake, who's a very active contemporary artist, still is. It was a wonderful thing to have him. He basically, in a very long-winded exercise, made us come to the conclusion that if there's not a moment when, if you're a writer or photographer or whatever it is, if there's not the occasional moment where you think to yourself, wow, maybe I'm really, really good at this. And if you don't have that moment, you're actually in trouble. And that moment is something that you almost have to force yourself sometimes, particularly in those darker times of, creative doubt or drought. But yeah, and I'll take the great PR.
No, that's a neat anecdote. And so before letting you kind of take over, just a word to everybody in the audience here. We have a couple classes that have joined us, and I think a lot of people from the public join this as well. If you have questions and they occur to you, put them in the chat, and we can then find places to pause and read them. But then I think that, a little later on, Michael and I had a fantasy of actually having a live discussion. And I think that we can then allow people to, actually chime in and ask things. And so let's try to work with that for now, and then, kind of see where it goes. But, definitely Michael and I view this as something that we want it to be a dialogue, as opposed to
absolutely
Michael lecturing us on how to rule or something. So
I mean, me lecturing you guys about pictures of me, because that's the bulk of what this is about my self-portraiture, has a touch of, I'd rather keep it as conversational as possible. This was the kind of thing I didn't feel that I should overly prepare for. So I would absolutely invite your questions. I work more that way in terms of articulating thoughts. So feel free to, if you want to interrupt, by all means, feel free. Or I'm not sure who's moderating the questions. As soon as I go to like full screen here, I stop kind of seeing you guys a little bit.
Right.
So let's jump in, and please feel free to interrupt me. That's where the best stuff is generally said.
That sounds great. And so what I would say is everyone is muted. And so unmute yourself when you have a question, and we'll just kind of take it from there. And then if you're shy, put it in the chat. And so it's yours, Michael.
Okay. Well, first off, I wanted to show you guys, this is going to be about self-portraiture more than anything. Up until a month ago, I've never been paid to do a self-portrait. This self-portraiture was never something that was supposed to become this thing that I did that was going to be something that identified me from other photographers. So I wanted to show you guys some of the portrait work that I did when I was, a lot of you guys are students. So when I was a student, this is a collection of mostly grad, some undergrad pictures, and I'll start going through some of these. And when I came out of school, these are the pictures that I then showed magazines, ad agencies, whomever I could get the pictures in their hands. And immediately I was labeled as portrait photographer because I was photographing people. But portrait photography in that sense was never anything that I particularly believed in. I never thought that a portrait was going to tell you that much about an individual, other than at most their physicality. And even in today's world with Photoshop, that doesn't even really play into it anymore as much. But to me, when I was doing these pictures in school, these were essentially, I used my friends and they were essentially characters. Mm-hmm. So I did not think of myself as a portrait photographer. My brother was going to film school at the time. I've always loved films. To me, that these were, the word that came up a lot in critiques in an art school setting was narrative. And I really liked that. I liked the idea that I could tell these stories through these images. That same professor, Nayland Blake, at one point he said, and this really kind of hurt me at the time, he said, everybody in this room was sitting here and we're all talking about these stories and using the words narrative, but as far as I can see, these are basically all one sentences, and at most it's a one sentence from a Smith song. And you're basically telling the exact same story over and over again. And at the time that bothered me because that seemed, very limited to me. But what it did do was it kind of helped me think of the idea that pictures and portraiture were always implied, that there really was no story that was going to be told, but that I could imply a story. And that all the things that supposedly happened before and the things that happened after, we don't know. Plus, there was a set-up quality to my work, which meant that these weren't captured moments, these were created moments. So this was kind of how my style started.
Yeah.
Pictures of my
Hey,
friends. Say again?
Oh, a question for you. So what year is this? Is this like 1988, like 1989 or something like that?
No, this is 92 to 96.
Oh, 92 to 96. And so who were you looking at that time? Like, who were the photographers that you would look at and be like, oh, I want that, or I need that, or I respect that?
Annie Leibovitz.
Really?
Loved her right out of the gate. I went to a very fine art school setting, and I have often joked that in my art school, I would have been labeled most likely to sell out, most likely to go commercial.
Yeah.
The goal was more to be in galleries, not necessarily to be on album covers or in magazines. So I was actually more, particularly in undergrad, I'd put Lou Reed on or Bob Dylan, and all these images would go through my head, and I would actually sketch these images down. So these pictures generally started off as a very loose sketch, and then I would try to, pick my fellow student, my friend that kind of fit that role. In undergrad, I thought it was a bit more about a generational statement. As an older, with more insight, I realized that was honing myself in a little too much at the time, but it helped progress the way the work functioned. I was, in art school, very quickly turned on to Cindy Sherman. When self-portraiture started to become more of a thing to me, I liked the fact that Sherman's work wasn't really supposed to be a picture of her.
Yeah.
But it was considered was it a self-portrait? What was it? Kind of thing. Lucas Samaras.
Oh, yeah.
What I really liked about his work was the self-consciousness to it. The overly ridiculous theatrical lighting, the fact that you could see the light stand, you could see he was bringing attention to the artifice of all of it, which kind of legitimized some of my need to set things up. When I first got to San Francisco, I started hanging out on the Haight and some of these grungy cafes, seeing if I could, get the quote real shot of the stuff that I was setting up. And it just seemed like too much of to me, that was way too difficult. It was a lot easier for me to grab a few lights. I mean, I had to learn how to use the tools, but it was a lot easier for me to witness these things in real life and then reenact them.
Yeah.
Because to me, there was not the idea of photography being a real medium. To me, was something that I never really thought of it as truth. The way we were, if you go back to the Lewis Hine and that whole time period, and Sally Mann was early for me. Lee Friedlander, Nan Golden. What starts happening is a lot of this work that I did at the time was very contrived, and it wasn't until I got to grad school, which was 94, that people started telling me about Jeff Wall. I didn't even know if Crutzen was a name yet for himself, but Gregory Crutzen, who's kind of an art star now. Philip Lorca de Corsia was huge for me.
Absolutely.
Huge. And this is one thing that when I teach and I try to tell students that, back in 95, if I was doing work that, had some sort of an association or a kinship to Philip Lorca de Corsia, and somebody said to me, "Hey, Lewis, you should check that guy out," it wasn't like we could just, you really had to go find that.
Yeah.
It was a difficult thing. So I was at once validated by this movement that was happening. At the same time, I felt self-conscious that, like, oh shit, this isn't something I came up with. This is something that's been other people have been doing. I knew that Hollywood had been doing it from the beginning of their medium, but to me, setting stuff up in photography and that hyper real aesthetic that Phil Lorca da Corsa really kind of nailed. That was kind of new to me, and I wasn't sure what to make of it when I saw that there were others that were doing it as well.
Right.
So now I'm going to switch to the real world, which if my dad was listening and alive, he would get a kick out of that. It's a little bit of an inside joke. But basically, we're going to jump to now me starting to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I took, those are just a couple of pictures that I showed you. I took those pictures and I took them around the magazines. And I'm not going to show you guys that work because that's not what this lecture is about. But I wanted to show you what started to happen. And one of the things that led me to self-portraiture, which was everything that you just saw was taken with a medium format camera, a Hasselblad, and some strobe lights. I got very comfortable with those tools. So when I started getting hired professionally, I was able to pretty confidently use those tools, use my slightly dramatic aesthetic that I was playing with, which the lighting helped contribute to push that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to see if I could do the same thing with a different tool, how that affected me. And I started using, I kept with my friends. This is my brother, who's been a very influential figure in my photography, particularly in my self-portraits. And then the thing we'll end with, which is when I jump into the set. So I started, at this point, I kind of have to make people look good. I mean, even if it's a CEO for Fortune magazine and it's not your obvious Hollywood type, everybody's wants to look good. And you don't want to be the photographer in a commercial world that somebody looks at the picture and says, great picture, but wow, she looks like hell.
Yeah.
Like generally you want the people to look good. And in the work that I was doing in grad school, even if it was melodramatic, I felt that everybody kind of looked good. So at this point, I start shooting commercially. I kind of have to handle things a certain way. So I start using my 4x5 camera. And right off the bat, people liked my lighting. So what I wanted to do, these two are lit. What I wanted to start to do was, in my personal work, could I take pictures that people didn't look good? Could I actually maybe push their insecurities a little bit?
Mm.
And at the same time that I'm doing that, it's kind of it's a reaction to me. Quickly, the celebrity thing started. So quickly, there's stylists. People are dressing them. They're doing their hair, their clothing. If they don't look good, the publicist is upset. But in my personal work, I didn't have to adhere to any of those things. So it was very liberating to try a new tool, the 4x5, in a portrait type of setting. B, not have to worry if somebody looked good. Does somebody have a question? So I started taking these 4x5 portraits of my friends, notably a little bit character, like this guy with the red pants. Those were his red pants, but I specifically wanted him to look a little out of place. I wanted the guy in the dental office to look a little uncomfortable. I wanted this guy's suit to not look like a nice suit. And most of my friends were cool with it. At that time, people didn't think that I'd be showing these pictures 20 years later. I don't think anybody thought that, including myself at the time.
Right.
And then came this picture. And this is a guy that we grew up with. He was a good friend of mine. He was very interested in learning photography. And his name is Jim. And I said to Jim, hey man, let's do this picture. I assisted this photographer in the Bay Area. I knew exactly when that shaft of light would come through when I would, because I would go there every day. So I took Jim, I asked him to wear clothing that he was not, these were not the clothes that he was going to walk out into the real world wearing. He was not comfortable looking like this. And he did not like the Slurpee cup. And back then we used Polaroid, and I pulled the Polaroid and I looked at it. And I remember Jim said, he's like, he's like, dude, I mean, it's cool, but I kind of look like hell. in the picture? And I said, yeah, that's kind of what I was going for. And that's when I started to realize, and this was also happening as I was being hired, that, well, these are not just my pictures. These are pictures of people. And at the end of the day, people are going to look at this picture and they're going to see him more than they're going to, or hopefully equally maybe, that they'll see the creator of the photograph in it too. So I felt that the only fair thing to do after this conversation I had with Jim was to turn the camera around on myself.
Mm.
So this was one of the first pictures, I'm not going to say self-portrait. This is one of the first pictures I took of myself. It was one of the first jobs I had. It was a wallpaper company. They'd come into my studio. They'd put up the wallpaper. They had a plexiglass thing with flowers on it to give you the sense of scale. I thought it was very tacky designs. My studio mate at the time was a painter, and she would wear this suit so she didn't get paint on herself. So I thought it'd be funny to look like a janitor, you know, put myself in that suit. Everybody liked it. My friends, everybody back then meant my friends. You know, people thought it was funny. And I started doing, I have a whole, you know, some of the resolution of these are going to be pretty poor because I took iPhone snapshots before I did this afternoon. I started kind of characterizing myself. I grew up in this blue collar town, but my dad was a dentist. So this really wasn't me. This was maybe more some of the people I went to high school with. We would go on family vacations, and we would always joke about the fudge kitchen because there was they would always have a kid out there giving out fudge samples, and me, my brother, and my dad particularly would take too many samples. So we joked about this, and then I asked the company, hey, would you give me a shirt and let me stand out there? And had the camera set up. Next thing you know, people are ignoring the camera. People are actually taking the fudge samples. And I thought it was great. And my brother then sees these pictures and is more like them. And he says, they're cool pictures. They're funny, they're fun, but they're not really you. Like, that's not you. You don't work at the fudge kitchen in the summer. You aren't that blue collar guy. You're not a janitor. They're fun pictures, but they're not really you. Right at about this time, I make this picture, which starts to kind of bridge the gap a little bit between me as a character and me legitimately being what I thought was a visual diary of what was going on in my life. At this point, I was driving cross country. It was back when you would lose cell phone reception quite a bit. And I knew that there was something somewhat comical about the baseball bat, but I kind of played it off in my own head as, almost like a metaphor, so to speak, of me being kind of afraid. I had just moved to LA. This was the first time I moved to LA. Wanted to quickly show you a couple of these pictures that were happening simultaneously when I started doing these, continued doing these self-portraits, where this was a friend of mine. I knew the sleeves were too long. He knew the sleeves were too long. He asked if he could curl them up. I asked him not to. Like, he did not particularly, this guy likes this picture of himself. But again, it's not what you would refer to as necessarily a flattering picture. This was the first time that this was my friend's uncle. And when he saw the picture, he absolutely hated it, because to him, it wasn't at all flattering, and he wasn't in on the joke the way, like Sal, my buddy, he was okay to look awkward for the picture.
Yeah.
This guy's hubris was challenged.
Yeah.
And this is what was happening in my commercial life. Early on when Us Magazine used to commission stuff, I was working for Us at the time, and they'd give me a comedian, and as much as they liked me and they trusted me and they gave me the job, they would often say, hey, can we get a smile every now and then? Can we get the eyes looking at the lens now and then? So I don't know if you've noticed, nobody's ever addressed the lens up till this point. So these are three iconic photographers that, if you guys are art students, photo students, hopefully you're somewhat familiar with these three. Hank Wessel at the bottom there, I was his TA at San Francisco Art Institute. I moved to LA. My career's doing well. I went from a highly social period in my life, undergrad and grad, and you might know this, Tim, well. Photo can be a very lone wolf endeavor.
For sure.
So as great as things were in LA professionally for me, things were very difficult. And I found myself very lonely at times. So, you know, my style of photography, to me, Robert Frank is one of the coolest guys out there. It's a shame he just recently passed, but I mean, the guy was what, 100? But the Americans and that aesthetic to me is kind of the coolest of all aesthetics.
Yeah.
So it kind of gave me this, I was bored. I didn't know what to do. I was kind of having this creative shutdown because I was in LA and I suddenly didn't have my friends that were willing to play into this. So I decided, just like Avedon did, I'm going to be the East Coaster. It's going to take long drives in Nevada and Utah, take my camera with me, and see if I can do these pictures and see if I can do it without using lighting, which I was becoming highly dependent on in my personal work. So what would happen is I would set up a shot, I would wait for somebody, they would come by, they would generally be highly skeptical when I would ask them, will you sit in for the picture? I would generally then, I'd show them the Polaroid. I'd say, look, I'll give you a Polaroid of yourself. I'll tell you what, you can take one of me. And I was already doing some self-portraits. But then I didn't know which one to choose, me or the guy on the right. And I also would take plates when there was nothing in it at all. So suddenly I started having these empty environments, or me, or the person that was more indigenous of that area. I still felt almost back to what my brother was saying. Maybe I'm a tourist over here, but that's not the place that I go get my lunch. This is the place where the guy on the right gets his lunch. So I still kind of felt a little bit weird about that. Here's another one of like kind of just showed you.
So how old are you when you're making these pictures? Like, what are we
At this point, it's probably around 1999. So I'm 29.
Oh, 29. So it's
Yeah.
not really a kid, but you're not like the adult with kids, really. You know.
Not yet. Not yet. What I was at the time, though, was actively working. In some ways, was busier then than ever. I mean, like I was doing a lot of what would be considered somewhat glamorous, because at this point now I'm in LA. The celebrity thing takes off.
Yep.
That has a certain cachet, which bothered me, by the way, because I felt like I was sometimes being judged more by who I photographed and not the picture, which made me all the more want to take these kind of, for lack of a better word, boring pictures of myself. And again, there's very little, if almost no lighting. And if you look at my work, part of my goal was, can I do this? Can I make a Michael Lewis picture look like a Michael Lewis picture without using Michael Lewis's general sense of lighting? You know, because I have great respect for people that use natural light, and I'm just not that good at it.
Right.
So driving around the desert gave me this reason to get out of my apartment because I was lonely, drive around, make pictures, meet weird people, get into weird situations. I started having a harder time finding people that would sit. I started thinking, maybe they should just be me. This was Memorial Day. I remember thinking, I'm in LA. I had a Spin, which is a music magazine, cover out, and I was alone on Memorial Day because I really didn't know that many people. So I took this picture on Memorial Day. I remember it very well. More pictures of me, just kind of lonely guy, which is what LA was for me.
So you think that these are accurate? Like you're no longer playing a role. You think these are you? This is accurate to the time.
Yes. To me, these are very, I like to think of these as very accurate. Very unlike the me in the monkey suit or the janitor suit or the me and, wearing the fudge kitchen. To me, these were real. They were self-conscious, but to me, every photograph is self-conscious, including supposed candid pictures because they're not candid to the photographer that's taking them.
Right.
Where I'm teaching right now, there's this term that's been thrown around called performed self-portrait. And I had a student say it, and I had a couple students say it, and I had never heard that before, performed self-portrait. And I actually said this to you the other day, Tim, when we talked briefly. I for a moment got insecure, and I'm like, should I know this? I mean, I've been supposedly doing self-portraits for 20 some years. And to me, it sounded like a little bit of a redundant term, because by the time you're setting up that camera and then you're putting yourself in it, there is no such thing as candid.
No.
So they have to be performed. Now, are these more real to me than Cindy Sherman's pictures? My gut reaction is to say yes, that these are pictures of me. I don't think Cindy Sherman thinks that those pictures, those untitled film stills, are her. I think I don't want to speak for her, and I haven't read that much about it, but she's using it more as iconic figures. These were very much to me about me, and at this point, I still don't think that I wasn't showing this to people yet. I was very actively working. And then right about the last self-portrait I did before moving to New York. This was literally the last shot I did in LA. Movers came, emptied out the apartment. I realized, I had my gear because I was going to travel cross country. I'm very happy I did this picture. I then moved to New York, and that's in 2000. Yeah. That was in 2001. I moved to New York, and I stopped doing the self-portraits. At the time, it still did not seem like it was going to be this project that was going to take me through life. It was an exercise in learning how to not use lighting, how to use a view camera, and it combated a lot of the feelings I had about being a commercial photographer. I was still making personal work. It didn't conform to some of the things that you had to conform to when you're doing commercial work with publicists and all that kind of stuff. Right. So I stopped doing these, and
I have a question.
Sure.
Let me interrupt. So those pictures that we just looked at, though, I've seen all these images from you. And so you were doing something with these. Weren't you entering them in contests, or you were they weren't just in a box?
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked that, because I got a website. And I was very proud of these pictures.
Right.
And I hope my mom is listening to this. I hope she's on right now if she figured it out. But, I started doing I moved to New York. I started doing online dating. And, hey, so what do you do? I'm a photographer. Oh, you have a website? Yeah. So they went up on my website, and I was quite proud of them. And I remember my mother hearing about this, and she says to me, "You're out of your mind if you think you're going to meet a woman and they're seeing these pictures of you." And I was quite proud of it. I 100% understood her standpoint. And I kind of said to her, look, if they see me with my belly hanging out and they still come for the date, I've already gotten that out of the way.
Yeah.
Then what happened was I got one of my agents, I forget which, my third agent, loved these self-portraits, managed to get me a show at the lobby of an ad. I can't even remember the ad agency. I'd have to look it up.
Wow.
And that's what forced me to go print 20 by 24s of 20 of these older pictures. And then I put them up on the wall. And at this point, 3 or 4 years had passed. Mm-hmm. And when I put them all up on the wall, I was kind of stunned how much I had changed, like physically, a lot had changed in my life.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I started to see the historical context of this, because at that point, they weren't historical to me. Right. It had all happened within a 3-4 year period of time. So I started doing them again, and I started somewhat obsessively doing them again. not trying to overthink them, trying to have the camera with me. I mean, I'm not a guy that carries my camera around all the time. So I was generally aware that I was going to potentially be in a situation where a lot of these happen during jobs. Again, most of these are natural light, which was something that was important to me just because I was trying to figure out just a different stylistic approach to my other photography.
Yeah.
So I just kind of started doing these somewhat obsessively. I mean, it wasn't like I was doing, there was a lot of them. Whenever the opportunity lent itself, this is me on a job, thinking nobody's looking. What happens if I quickly set up one of my portable flashes and this, I made the picture. So whenever I had it, that's the house I grew up in and my parents' first dog.
That's great.
This was me still online looking for a woman. So yeah, I'm just working out. I figured this was something that I should capture. These two, I have slight conflict with because the one of me in the waiting room, or rather the examining room, that was a job. And I saw it as an opportunity for me to quickly throw on the gown and make a self-portrait out of it. It felt unfair because it was a job, but yet I do go to the doctor. The other one of me coming up the steps was a picture I did of somebody, and it's hard to get that moment. And I remember thinking I didn't get the shot as much as I wanted it to. So I asked my assistant, hey man, let's start banging these out of me. And so these were two that were done, somebody else was supposed to be me in these pictures. More just self-portraits all from that time period. My parents moved to Florida. This is me visiting them in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
This is the morning of the Thanksgiving dinner. The day after Thanksgiving. My dad took a lot of these. He was behind the camera because this is still a hassle. Some of these are now back to being The other thing is when I started doing them again in New York, I started using the Hasselblad because the 4x5 just didn't lend itself to make, if I was hired to do a job, I'd like the camera, but if I wasn't being hired, I wanted to make it as easy as possible.
Right. So, I mean, at this point, you're creating a lot of these things. Are you showing them when you show your portfolio or do any, when you're meeting photo literate people?
Yes, I started to interweave them into my portfolio. It was always difficult. That's actually a good timing, you asking me this. I started to interweave these into my portfolio. And people would, I recommend all young photographers, even though everything's digital these days, it's still good to have a physical book, because when you go to meet somebody, for them to look at your physical book is going to be a very different experience.
Oh, yeah.
Generally, when they would come to the picture of me, they generally would laugh. They would think it's kind of funny. A, they know me. B, I'm standing right there. This is a real picture. It is lit of my brother's behind the camera. This is us digging the hole in the front yard of my parents' home before we put my dad's ashes in it and planted a tree. Now, when I would show this picture in my book, this would evoke a bigger laugh than most. And I remember I would tell, usually I kind of knew these photo editors at this point, and I would tell them the story, and bam, the energy would just die in the room. And that's when I started to realize, you know what? If they want to think it's a funny picture, let them think it's a funny picture. Because they don't have to be married to my personal story, the viewer. Right. So that it was an interesting experience. So yeah, I was starting to show them around, and then I had another agent that started recommending that I take, my package, when I sent my portfolio to anybody, it was a 16 by 20, a little bit smaller actually portfolio. And then there'd be an additional 11 by 14 book that had the self-portraits in it. So it was presented as a package deal, but it was separated that way.
Yeah. Now, there is a belief that, seems to come up with every guest artist, and I'm kind of a big believer in this, that, creative agencies, they, the commercial work is something, and there are some people that their commercial work is their personal work, if you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
there's an editorial photographer, Andrew Hetherington, who I think is excellent. And he always says, well, no, my assignment work is my personal work. Like, I don't do separate things. And myself, I'm always a kind of believer, kind of had this idea that everybody wants to see your personal work. That's the stuff that sticks, and that is every project that that has stuck in our brain by other photographers and that has influenced us, 99.9%, it's someone's personal work. It's not necessarily their commercial work. Now, in your case, though, your commercial editorial work was very unique and had a very strong voice. Do you feel that clients wanted to see your personal work, or were they just giddy to see all the celebrities and the funky way that you were photographing them?
Well, we're starting to get more current here, and the conversation. My brother's always been a critical bounce board in a way that has been positive. Mm-hmm. His angle, what he started to question to me was, would this not be better if they weren't pictures of you? Like, at what point are people not going to be ultimately you want to get work, right? Like, at what point are people going to not be able to see past that it's a picture of you? And that did become, and still remains, something that I struggle with. I think art directors, photo editors do want to see your personal work. I think if you show them, and I never do this, a book of 50 pictures of me, they're not going to hire me to take a 51st picture of Joe Blow, So it became this thing that, nobody has ownership on any ideas. And certainly nobody has ownership on self-portraiture. But it became this thing that people remembered and expected from me.
Absolutely.
And then the last thing I'll show you guys, the me jumping into the picture, has become a strange expectation and has created a lot of conflict in my head. So these are basically chronological. Mm-hmm. This was actually one of the first self-portraits I did that was digital, because I still wanted to shoot film, even though my commercial work was digital. But when she went into labor, it didn't occur to me. I'm very glad that I even brought my camera at all.
Right.
So this is about as real as it gets in terms of the realness of things. Although I have several things stacked up to prop the camera, and I did have a nurse saying, you shouldn't be doing this, you should let her rest. But still, it's about, to me, as real as it gets. Then this is our last day in New York. So I took this back to film. So this is actually the last time I shoot film on maybe ever, actually.
Yeah.
And then we moved to LA. I threw this in here just because it comes from a whole different body of work. And at the time, I had lost my dad. We were going to have a baby. We were going to move to LA. And I kept saying to my wife that I feel like a glass of water, that if you put just one more drop in the glass, I'm going to spill over. And I always liked playing with the idea of metaphor. So I kind of wanted just to throw this in there to throw that out there. Oh, yeah. So here we're driving cross country. Now everything's digital. The car starts to fall apart. I saw it as a wonderful metaphor to things falling apart. Me being in too deep.
Yeah.
That to me was metaphoric.
Oh yeah.
I'm almost hesitant to talk about metaphor, because I don't really like knowing about process too much. Sometimes it comes off when people say that. I'd almost, it can come off kind of trivial, if not even trite. But there is metaphor that happens, and it's one of the ways that I approach doing these. There was a drought in California a couple years back. This to me was a literal metaphor of the last of the water.
Oh yeah.
Life forever changed. Again, the idea of the broke down car. was something that kept continuing. I started teaching. I wanted to give evidence of me being in a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
More pictures that talked about, these are actually commissioned by Men's Health, which I never thought would go for this kind of thing. When they asked me to do, the plate comes from a photo illustration of couples that fight too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised that they would go for that. I was thinking they would want it to be a little more literal. The
Right.
other one was about Alzheimer's, but the water overflowing the tub to me very much kind of felt like that glass of water that I had taken. So for me, a lot of these things, what helps me make these pictures is metaphor. The water following me, it's that quintessential moment. It's also metaphoric, that things are becoming a bit of a mess. It's kind of comical at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, unbeknownst to me, I have a vertebrae that is starting to go into my spinal cord. I've always had neck problems. Things were getting scary for me. And I wanted to continue making these self-portraits. And this is where metaphor helped play in a lot. I wanted the idea of fear and being on the edge to be conveyed. I didn't want to be literal about it. That's where this came from. I started to not be able to, I was concerned. It got so bad before my surgery that I was starting to have some problems walking and keeping my balance.
Oh, man.
That's when I took this picture. Then I figured, this was after the surgery, I figured, if you're really going to commit to a lifetime project, you got to commit to a lifetime project. So I'm very proud of doing this picture just because, there's a lot of other shit was on my mind at this moment, but I'm very glad that my wife ran home, got the camera, and we did it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my son, now as I'm getting older, I realize that there is a historical context to these things because of it's starting to become a 20+ year visual diary of my life. So I want to see my kid grow up. I tried to combat how pensive self-portraiture can be. That to me was a way of trying to add some lightheartedness because not everything was pensive.
Yes.
I'm in LA, the bright lights of the big city, yet I'm in my car all the time. Locked out, that was kind of a metaphor. I was about to leave LA. My kudos to my wife for taking this one, no tripod or anything, and she nailed it. And we actually were using a flash on this one up into the ceiling.
Yeah, we were discussing this picture in class and couldn't figure out how you did it. And so so you were lighting, you had the light all set up and your wife took the picture.
I mean, it's literally an on-camera flash pointed straight up.
Oh, really?
And we did it enough that we accidentally missed the dinosaur exhibition that we were supposed to be going to. We were going to something, but my kid Theo, he handled it like a champ. We did it enough that people just stopped paying attention. I mean, I was actually surprised how little people seemed to care.
Right.
But it's a challenge to do a self-portrait with a lot of other people in it.
Yeah.
And it works within the context. It's a self-portrait. But if you just saw this, I don't think you would think self-portrait. But this was right before I left LA, the second time. I've lived in LA twice. This is last day in LA.
That's beautiful. So the one observation I had is in this later chapter, your stuff doesn't look like, it doesn't seem to, it looks much more raw, much less like stylized. There's something different. Like it seems like it's just a picture, if that makes any sense. Like it seems.
Well, no, like this was, you're bringing up these questions like these comments at the perfect time, because this was when I started to realize that series within series were being born. Mm-hmm. If you look at the one all the way to the left, a lot of my self-portraits looked that way. They were very clean.
Yes.
Like things were very organized. I mean, my pictures have always been very organized.
Yeah.
But then with the, in the middle, things start to get dirtier. And that's with the Hasselblad. And now that I'm using an SRL, yes, the tendency for a quote more real look has transpired.
Mm-hmm.
These are the most recent ones. Me driving cross country to live in Ithaca. Missing California when I first got here.
That's great.
My 50th birthday, and I realized I can't believe I never did my 40th birthday or my 30th birthday, but I will do my 60th birthday for sure. These last three are commissioned by AARP. They're doing a thing with Gen X photographers documenting life during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So these pictures were taken, a month or two ago, and were the first time that I ever got paid to take a self-portrait.
Oh yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. So the last one is the most recent image that's made during the pandemic?
There. This one was done about a week or two ago. So that's the most, I mean, yes, these three were pandemic specific. This is not. But that is what's happening right now. In fact, I was driving an hour and a half to go get my computer fixed because the Apple stores were closed in Syracuse. That's when I saw this road. So if not for the pandemic, this shot might not have happened as well.
No, that's beautiful. Hey, let's pause here a little bit, and I want to reach out to my class, that you're speaking to in particular, and the students had prepared a bunch of questions that I just wondered, while we were looking at, your non-celebrity, self-portraits, if the students would like to speak up and chime in on any of these things, because they really did have some great questions. So feel free to put anything in the chat or speak up. We're just taking a little pause here. So I would encourage all of you, whoever does it first, they will get special extra credit.
Liz McGovern-ish. I grew up with Liz McGovern, and the ball. I had this, early on. When I first left and went to San Francisco, I enjoyed going back to Reading, Pennsylvania, where I grew up, and harvesting this different demographic that I actually grew up alongside of. It felt very. This is good. Good to see you there, Liz.
It's good to see you too, Mike.
That's very cool. Stanley Phillips, give us a question.
How much research do you put in before you go to a shoot?
We're talking like a commercial. I'm assigned to shoot an architect or a magazine.
Yes.
I will obviously look up the person. I will find out a little bit about them. I will try to get some copy from the magazine. Copy meaning what's written. Generally, the copy isn't written or is in the works of being written. At least my experience is there's very little interaction between the writers, surprisingly, the writers and the photographers. And the more I still go back and forth on this, but I think part of the reason for that is they want the photographers, to literally have fresh set of eyes, not be necessarily, this is speculative on my part, not necessarily be overly colored by what the writer has already started to formulate an opinion of. I will try to get as much time as I can beforehand to get there. If I can scout the location beforehand, I will. That means go to it, check it out, make sure okay, we'll do a shot there, we'll do a shot there. For celebrity work, often you're told where you're going to shoot it, or you're asked, where do you want to shoot it? And I'll end up picking a diner that I was at recently because it was cool. And what I don't like about celebrity work is the fact that that celebrity's never been to that diner. Celebrity, there's cachet to it, and it's a great marketing tool. But those were never really the most interesting pictures to me. If I don't get a chance to go before, I'll always ask for as much time as possible. A line that I give every personal assistant, publicist, whoever's dealing with the subject and the shoot is, the more time you give me ahead of time is the less amount of time of the subject that I'm going to need. So my goal is to get there, quickly hash out a plan. Like, so this is all you're going to give me, this conference room? Is there anything else maybe you could show me? You got to be a little pushy sometimes. Try to have 3 or 4 shots kind of ready to go, particularly the celebrity, at the CEOs as well. I mean, you get maybe 10 minutes to do 3 or 4 setups. So the more time I can get ahead of time, and I always have an assistant. The assistant acts as A, physically to help me, and B, they act as the stand-in for the lighting. So there's my buddy. We got the picture ready. When Nicolas Cage walks in, it's ready to roll. And we don't even do a test shot. And I try not to, I'd rather the subject not even see what we're doing, which you used to be able to do in a world of film. It's gotten a lot harder,
Oh, yeah. No, everybody.
Yeah.
Now, hey, a couple questions came in here that I'll just kind of read to you from Adrian Powell. Students often wonder where they should move after they graduate for certain areas of the photo industry. You talked about your moves a lot, moving to, across the country and moving in these different places and being born in a different part of the country. Where were the moves? Were the moves all for more access to your work, or what motivated the moves? And we're talking about your personal work, so I think keep both of your bodies of work in mind as you answer these.
San Francisco was because I wanted to go to San Francisco. I mean, I wanted to go to graduate school. I knew I was on to something at the end of undergrad. I knew no bank was going to give me a loan to go take 2 years of my life off, buy a ton of film, paper, drink beer with buddies, talk about art. So San Francisco seemed like a great place to go. I didn't want to go to Cal Arts. My brother was in LA and I didn't want to get, I wanted us to have our own thing. B, Cal Arts, they had just had the earthquake, Northridge, and didn't seem like the right place to go. Yeah. RISD seemed too much like what I was used to. So, San Francisco was because it was a good school and I wanted to go to San Francisco. When I went to LA, it was my brother that said to me, and things have changed. I mean, this was 98. My brother said to me, maybe you could come down to LA, be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. And in 98, it was a smaller pond. Not anymore. If anything, I feel like everybody that I know has moved to LA in the last 10 years, Yeah. The other thing about LA back then in the late 90s, early 2000s was all the photo editors were like, oh, wow, we have an East Coast aesthetic working in LA. Because LA had this bad rep of having a certain overly polished
lifestyle,
West Coast vibe. Southern California, not West Coast. No offense to you Northern Californians.
No, for sure.
But it's true though. I mean, that Hollywood look. When I moved to New York, it was for social reasons as well as I thought maybe I'm a bigger fish in that smaller pond. Can I make it in the other town? My folks lived in Pennsylvania, so it was a homecoming. The big thing was back then, as you know, Tim, you had to be near a lab.
Oh yeah.
Like you had to be in an urban center that had a lab that would process the film. And I used to try to do my own printing, but hopefully you were busy enough that you couldn't. So you needed to be anchored to one of these urban centers, not just because of who you were taking pictures of, but because, now you can live on top of a mountain and you are your own lab, which has been pretty great.
Yeah.
About digital. It was a mixture of social. Moving back to LA, I thought I wanted to do the celebrity thing again. Family. So it's, I think the regional photographer has a better chance nowadays than they did when we first started.
Oh yeah.
I think nobody's flying you to Minneapolis anymore.
I think that, and then I think that the photographic like intelligence has increased and become more universal than it ever has. Like,
Well, I mean, think how many more people are going to school for it and
that,
talking about it.
and I think everyone gets to see everyone's work, so like that they can learn from each other's work so much faster than they used to be able to. You know, like these days, if you want to hire a photographer out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, he's gonna be excellent. You know what I mean? Where in the past you would think, well, are they going to be able to fit the aesthetic of a magazine or something like that? And now I guess I feel like these things have like, there's just been a great equalization due to how
Well,
much
the
access.
internet, you know, like I said before, like in '94, when somebody told me to go check out Jeff Wall,
Yeah.
I mean, good luck. I mean, even though my school had an art library, I was literally checking out slides.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I tell that to a student, and bam! I mean, that's the only. It's like that's when I say take your phones out right now, actually, and go to Instagram or Google or whatever the hell, and look at it. You're so much more. Like back when we started working, I only knew you because I remember opening up Fortune magazine, who I was working for, and being like, "Damn, that's good. Who the hell is this guy?" Not because I was on Instagram looking at all these photographers, you know?
Yeah, right. No, you would look at each other's work in magazines because that was like the kind of pop culture way to look at photography and people who did what you do. And then now it's all, it's Instagram, you know, and if after Instagram, it's going to be something else. But it makes teaching funner though, because you can like, if someone doesn't know who Jeff Wall is, they will by the time the class is over, you know? So that kind of instantaneous knowledge ladder.
You know, trends go faster now. I mean, one thing I've always said, even back before, don't try to trace like a lot of people, young photographers, for you guys out there, they'll see a trend, colored gels, and they'll think, holy shit, I got to do colored gels.
Oh yeah.
And by time you get proficient at it, A, do you really want to do that to begin with? That's a whole different philosophical question. B, by time you get proficient doing it, that trend's gone. Like it happens so quickly.
Yeah.
That you want me to show this fun?
I do. Let's go a couple other questions here,
Sure.
and one kind of relates to it.
Sure.
You know, and what is your greatest challenge as a photographer now and when you first started? And, you know, again, this can be about your personal work as well as your kind of career.
Ask the first part of that question again.
Yeah, what's your greatest challenge as a photographer?
Continuing to be one.
Really?
Two things that I tell young photographers is capitalize on your youth. You're not being known. That's one of the biggest assets you have when you're young. I mean, you don't really realize that. And I'm not talking even young as in how old you are, but like if nobody knows who you are, you're a notch on an art director or a photo editor's belt. If like, hey, I hired Tim before anybody knew who Tim was.
Oh, the discovery. Oh, sure.
And then I remember the lull when the assistant photo editors became the photo editors, and they wanted to know, like, hey, is your assistant, like, what's she doing or what's he doing?
Yeah.
And they didn't want to hire me.
Yeah.
My hope now, I enjoy teaching, is I hope guys like me and you start to become more the statesmen, of this industry, and hopefully, but the hardest challenge has been, I love being freelance. At the same time, it offers zero stability. One of the challenges is, days I shoot are easy. I mean, I'm stressed as hell. Every shoot, I'm stressed as hell. And there's nothing worse feeling than when it's not going right. But it's the days I'm not shooting those are the ones that are terrifying.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you have kids, you have more obligations and health insurance and, all these things. There was no 401k for the self-employed. I mean, there's all these, the freelance lifestyle was something that I never really thought about, although I was somewhat bred to be my own boss in many ways. But one of the challenges of full-time and I just started full-time teaching. One of the challenges there is not entirely being the master of your own domain.
Right.
When you don't have a boss, the only person you can get pissed off at is yourself.
Yes. Yes.
So does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I think. I mean, there's no wrong answers, really. I guess there is that idea, though, is that you will always be a photographer, right? It doesn't mean you have not, like, I mean, there's a philosophy I have where I feel like photographers have it hard, some of them, because they think, like, if they're not popular, then they themselves suck. Not their work sucks, but they suck. And
No, yeah.
you know what I mean? And I like to adopt this belief that, well, you can, like, when did you consider yourself as successful? Well, when I committed myself to this medium, not really when I was successful or not successful, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. I mean, the reason I became a photographer was, it was easy. Meaning, there was a bit of I was supposed to be a doctor, then that became a psychologist, and then by the time I entered my second year of college, my parents kind of sat me down and they're like, all right, like, what do you want to do? And then we came up with this art thing, advertising, and I needed to bulk up my portfolio because I was already in college, but I needed to go to the art school, and I took drawing, design, and photography. And I remember thinking, like, almost feeling like, well, this is just easy for me. Like, it felt too easy to me at first. But that confidence, that's the other thing about being young is, or I guess at any point in your career, your confidence is always going to be checked and challenged a bit. This is all I know how to do, is take pictures for the most part.
Right.
And teach. Outside of my personal life.
Right.
I'm damn good at doing that. I'm not damn good at doing many other things.
The age of specialization. So a question that, let's get into your next project, and a question that came in earlier that kind of relates to it, and I'm sure you're going to answer this, is at what point did these two worlds, the self-portraits that you did personally, and then the celebrity work, come together for the on-the-job photographs, which is what I think you're going to get into next.
Yeah. It's great fun. I've used the analogy, we said this the other day, it's like a candy bar. Like, it doesn't have a lot of substance, but it tastes great.
It's a blast to look at. Yeah.
And let me go to it.
Yep.
So what do I do here? Share the screen. Bear with me. Okay, so now I won't be able to see you, but oops.
There we go.
Okay. Here's the first one. How do I go full screen? There we go.
That's great.
That's amazing. The lunchbox.
Well, the lunchbox is kind of why this happened. I moved to LA. I'm working for Us Magazine. There's, for those that don't know, David Hasselhoff comes to the shoot with a publicist. There's going to be a stylist. For men, they usually have just one that's called a groomer for both hair, makeup, whatever. And then there's sometimes a prop stylist. And she showed up with this Knight Rider lunchbox, which was fantastic. And at the end of the shoot, he said, hey, do you want to, I'll sign it for you. Do you want to keep it? I'm like, hell yeah. And then the prop stylist says, no way. And my assistant, Brian Delaney, who, it'd be wonderful if he's listening. He's like, dude, why don't you got to get into the picture. You got to get a picture with him. And Hasselhoff, who's his own animal, he was very open to it, and you know, he didn't want to shoot the end, which was rare, you know. So you know, we had a good time, and that was the first one, and it started to become this way of getting autographs, essentially, without I mean, the autograph didn't mean much to me, but so I started just jumping into all of my shoots. Now, in the very beginning, you see things like I'm addressing the camera, we're just standing side by side, we're mugging. That didn't interest me as much. As I continued, I started to want to integrate myself more into the picture, that all these pictures exist without me in it. And that was what I was there to do. And one thing that people ask me a lot about is, you know, how do the people respond when you do this, when you jump in? I've almost never gotten a negative response. I did once. I'll show you that one later. The thing is, I cannot begin to tell you how immediately uncomfortable I feel the moment I get into the picture. The assistant gets thrown to camera. My assistants know me, or if it's on tripod, even better. But my assistants know me. They know the framing. They've seen what I'm doing. They know I'm going to do it. I used to not even tell the subject, but then I quickly did. But I'll get, you know, not me, the assistant will maybe get 4, 5, 6 frames off, and I jump out, because the moment I get in there, I feel the energy of the room. Even though people think it's fun and they like it, I just feel like, wait a minute, buddy, you're not here for this. Like, this is no longer about Senator Jeffords. This is now about you. And I get hyper self-conscious about that. So the whole thing happens very quickly. It doesn't always work, meaning I jump out after the 4 or 5 frames before the assistant had a chance to really get the shot. Sometimes with the celebrities, there's or anybody, there is so little time that I literally need every second to be shooting, because I know the moment that they walk away, I'm going to wish I had shot more. So I don't always have the time to do it. It then started to become, you know, when email started to become more of a thing, I started gathering a list together, and I would send these out every 6 weeks, 7, 8 weeks as a promo thing. And then again, it just started to kind of build on itself. And the funnier pictures to me are the ones that are actually quote unquote real people, which is actually an industry term for non-celebrity. Like, let's say you're doing a photo shoot of, not that guy, but yeah, like that's a real person in the industry, and we're doing a story because he was involved in whatever. Now my brother, his point when this started to become a thing was, that's a great picture of Jack Black. At least I think so. That's a great picture of me with Jack Black, but it's not a better picture of Jack Black. Like, if you put them side by side, the picture on the left, in many ways, is a bigger picture, or rather, a better picture to me.
Yeah.
The other one only works in the context of this thing that I do. And I was talking to Chris Buck the other day, and he was talking about legacy, and because finally the idea of doing a book of some sort is being tossed around. I mean, people have thought that the me jumping into my own shoot has been book worthy for a while, but I've always been uncomfortable with it. And my brother always would challenge me with the notion of, is it a better picture? Is it a more memorable picture because you're in it? I think the picture of Amy Adams on the left is better than the picture of me sitting there.
Well, it's a better portrait of her, but I think it's apples and oranges. I don't know if you can, there's two radically different things.
Yes, and then it becomes largely about context. When you see all these pictures of just me in it, you're kind of primed for the humor behind it. And this is an example of where the shot of Mark Maron on the you know, like I'd rather be like, if people are going to ask me, have you ever shot Mark Maron? I'd rather show them the picture on the right as compared to the one of me in the shot, because I think it's a better pic. Like the setup itself was a better setup on the right. I just didn't get in it because I only get into. I usually will set up 3 or 4 different setups of each celebrity, and you know I'll only get in maybe one of those 4 setups. As time has gone on, I can't help but when I'm setting, when I'm doing that scouting and I'm looking for the shots that I'm going to do, I can't help but in the back of my mind think, holy shit, Ringo Starr, I got to get a picture with him.
Oh, yeah.
But the picture on the left, you know, it's kind of arbitrary that I'm sitting there. It doesn't make it a better picture. Because it was Ringo Starr and he was so damn nice, I did the mugging shot, me and him together with the peace sign, which is not really kind of a part of this body of work.
Right.
Because of the environment. I shot Anthony Hopkins years ago, very low-res snapshot of a proof sheet. I was very disappointed at the time that all I got to do was like not be in the shot, like just like, hey, there's me and Anthony Hopkins.
Right.
I was very happy to like 15 years later or whatever, get another crack at him that I got into the shot. I really got to give it to my assistant on the shot here on the left. I mean, he got the perfect timing on that one. You know, another thing that starts to slowly happen here is Photoshop starts to become a thing in the industry. So it started to become more evident to me that people were going to start to question, wait a minute, were you there or did you put yourself in afterwards? So that started to come more and more into mind. And I started to look for ways that I could physically integrate with the subject that I had to have been there in order for that to happen. I will have to bow down to my brother again on this shot. I was on my way to shoot Tommy Chong, and my brother turns to me. He's like, you have a joint, don't you? I'm like, no. He's like, dude, you got to take a joint over to Tommy's place. And very glad he did. And me and Tommy it was a hell of a shoot because of the whole thing. Very happy that I got this picture. Me just interjecting myself into, I mean, where the regular self-portraits have become a journal of my life, and I think a somewhat accurate depiction of my life. One thing about jumping into, because I do this with all of my shoots, I jump into almost every one of them when I can, is they, for me, have become, I don't want to use the picture of Jack Black on my website because in today's world, your website's not supposed to be your monograph. It's supposed to be your best of your present work. So at least I get to keep the shot now of Jack Black when I'm in it, as compared to showing that as one of my feature pictures and saying, yeah, Lewis used to be great. Look how great he shot Jack Black 15 years ago. Yeah. So I get more life out of these pictures inadvertently that way. And they do become a journal of my commercial shoots for myself. And I do get to, you know, Shep Smith, when he left Fox News, I was thrilled for Shep Smith. Suddenly I liked this picture of me and him more. You know, the funnier ones to me are the ones that aren't the celebrity. Somebody say something?
I mean, there is something, though, about this stuff, and I understand how you think it's one note, which perhaps it is, but it's utterly refreshing. And it does, maybe I'm saying this because I'm a photographer, and so I know, like, what goes on at a photo shoot, but I think it kind of pokes fun at how high we hold celebrities or something like that, or the mystique we have around celebrities. Like, there's something about it that I do think works on a number of levels.
For me particularly, my work is generally not funny. I mean, the straightforward self-portraits, less and less, like, you know, by the time we're in the delivery room and all. But the earlier ones, when I'm just like lonely guy sitting by the Hoover Dam, people kind of thought they were funny, and they weren't to me. And again, even though I was shooting comedians, like, quite often a pensivity would seep into my work. And this does give me this chance to just have fun. And that's refreshing to me because I don't generally see a lot of humor in my own work, but these are overtly funny. So we're getting more recent here, and you're seeing my wanting to get more physical with the subjects to show that this is not Photoshop.
Yeah.
Excuse me, not Photoshopped in. This is one of those where I think it's actually a better picture with me in it than just me. The shot of just Marilyn Manson's pretty damn good too, but I particularly like this one with me.
Oh yeah.
Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo. This is one where, you know what, you take me out of it, it's probably a better picture of Nicolas Cage without me. Like me being in there is very incidental, doesn't really seem to have a huge purpose. But again, it's just for my own, this body of work, which has become a great promotional tool as well. People remember it. I've actually had my brother has sometimes said, aren't your photo editors going to be a little like, hey, well, why aren't you taking more pictures of who you're there to shoot? And it doesn't always happen because of that. It's gotten to the point now where the photo editor will often say to me, can't wait to see the picture of you in the shot. Like it's become this little extra thing that they look forward to as well.
Right.
Some people like this one. When I started photo bombing my own pictures too much, and I didn't like that, and so I stopped doing that. And again, the more I integrate into the picture, I couldn't have planned the blue and the blue better, but the more that I'm a part of the picture, the better it is to me.
Right.
And again, it gives me a chance to showcase, this picture of Katie Seagal, if I'm saying her name right, and Anna Gunn. I mean, they're actually not the greatest shots without me in them. My wife hates the one with Anna Gunn, the blonde on the left. She doesn't think it's a good shot no matter if I'm in it or not. But sometimes it adds a little splash of humor. Again, only if you know who I am and only if you know that this is a body of work. Otherwise, there's nothing funny about me sitting there with Katie Seagal.
Well, no, it looks like there's an interloper in this photograph. And like with these two, like who's this disheveled man who is sitting next to these very produced characters? I mean, maybe not that much in these two where the women seem a little more down to earth, but in some of them, I think it seems like some of them you hunt for you in a Where's Waldo type of way. And then in other of them, some of them, it almost seems like it's more a picture of you than the celebrity or something like
that. That's a dangerous line to walk on, though. When depending on how you handle it. Like, at what point do people want to see Leanne Rimes, and at the end of the day, don't really give a shit about Michael Lewis? It's like we're photographers, and if you remove this from the context, if you didn't know that I actually shot these people, you would assume that I put myself in post. And it's hard for me to remove this from everything else that I do. I can remove the self-portraits more than I can remove this because these are the shots that I did set up. I mean, this picture exists without me in it.
Right.
As a shot that was perfect for this particular assignment. And the other thing is, it is weird to be dependent on your assistant to sometimes frame these things up for you. And I put a ton of pressure on the assistant in how quickly I feel the need to get the hell out of the picture.
Right.
I can't stress how few frames this happens in because I feel very self-conscious. So they come off, like, for me, they are so not funny when they're happening.
Right.
But I'm very glad. This was the only one on the right. Not her. Carly Kloss, I think her name is, model. Her PR person freaked out. It was the weirdest thing. But a question I get often is, how do the people respond? And I would have to say 99% of the time, it's inviting. In fact, like this shot right here, the publicist was, was like, "What are you doing?" And she went. They each had their own publicist. They kind of went to pull them, and Tom Hanks was like, "What? No, no, what are you doing?" And I was like, I get into all my shots, and he thought it was. They thought it was hysterical, and they actually pushed their PR people back, and ended up giving us time for the shoot that they never would have given us to allow me to do this. So a lot of times the the subject that lets me get into the frame when I say, hey, this is this thing I do, which gives them the ability to say no. It is kind of asking, although I'm doing it while I'm asking. They're generally in favor of it.
So like with the Tom Hanks one, you knew that you needed like a thing of Windex before the shoot?
Wow. If you look at the other, I didn't think the other door was going to be in the picture.
Yeah.
And I think the final one of him and her, I don't think it is. Like, you see how dirty that door is?
Yeah.
That was like, this was done at Disney. I was one of Disney's publicists, not there, saying, somebody get that window clean. Yeah, so the Windex was there, and I saw it, and I was thinking, originally I was just going to sit on the bench. I didn't quite know how to integrate myself into the shot. And this was wonderful. When I saw that Windex, they were going to walk away with it, and I asked them, hey, could you leave it in case I need to clean the window again? But at that point, I knew 100% that that's my prop. That's that's what I'm going to do.
That's great. That's absolutely great. I mean, I will admit, like, I don't care about celebrities, I don't think, and I never even go to movies or anything. But with this work, though, no, I kind of look at it and I'm like, oh my God, it's Tom Hanks. Oh my God, it's Susan Sarandon. Like, I am more affected by the celebrity, by the celebrity that I'm perceiving as like higher in rank, even though I don't consider myself as someone who plays in that world, if that means anything.
Well, it's a good reflection. Look, it's a good reflection on me, that they like me, and like even in terms of my clients, that my subjects like me enough that they trust me to do this.
Yes.
B, it's kind of cool that they let me do it.
Yes.
So it's good PR in some weird ways for Susan Sarandon to be playful and allow this happen, because here we are talking about that right now.
Yes.
This is a rare shot where it's actually a better pick. Well, it's different. She did not want her foot thing in the picture. So the camera angle, and it's just her, is me high up. She's kind of sitting back playing with her hair. And then when I asked her if she'd let me be in the picture, she said, okay. And I said, do you mind if I show your cast? And she said, as long as you don't use that for the publication, you can do it for yourself. So she was particularly cool about this one.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And I think that's the last one. It seemed like a good end note.
No, it's perfect. Hey, we have a bunch of questions that just came in, but let's have a round of applause for that kick-ass work that we just saw. That was so good, and you are a natural teacher. So a bunch of questions here. Let me just kind of scroll back. Someone says it's almost as if Jack Black turned off being Jack Black in the portrait you did, in the portrait that doesn't have you in it. Would you agree to that?
Here's what I'll say, not to make blanket statements, but my experience with comedians are that they are some dark people. And the moment the camera is not on them, they can become very subdued, very withdrawn. And I don't know how much of that was that you're seeing in that picture, or how much of that is, again, me. That's 4x5. So the expectations on my assistant were even higher, because he's throwing that film in and out so fast that we might just not have gotten quite the right moment.
Right.
But in general, the comedians are, some are like Will Ferrell's who you would kind of want him to be, but Jack Black, I've shot him twice, and both times you feel like taking him aside and, is everything okay, dude? I mean, they seem very, again, that's a bit of a blanket statement, but that's been my experience.
every comedian I've had to photograph has always been a nightmare. And then it's usually the art director is like, it's going to be a blast. And then it's not a blast at all. It's like the worst photo shoot, at least in my
yeah. The other thing with comedians that I have found is, I found this with Key and Peele. They don't necessarily want you to come up with the gag. They're the comedian.
Yeah.
You know, like for me to come to the table and tell Will Ferrell what I think is funny about Will Ferrell, I learned my lesson really early on in '99. I shot my big first band, which was the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And my version of the Red Hot Chili Peppers back in '99 was, you know, goofy as hell, goofy.
Yeah.
And the album they were doing was Californication, which, you know, unbeknownst to me, to them is a serious record. Yeah, this is like my first big celebrity shoot in some ways. And I shot at my apartment in Beechwood Canyon, you know, courtyard, not like, you know.
Oh yeah.
And I spent 4 hours setting this thing up. I bought crazy props, all these things that they could play with. They come into my apartment. Flea is really nice, really ready to go, do whatever. Anthony Kiedis looks at he's like, wait a minute, because we're in the courtyard. Is that going to be the shot? And I'm like, what, yeah, one of them. It's like, I'm like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, like, you know, I'm just like, he's like, why don't we just do it out front? And I'm like, because I don't have any lights, I don't have any. And Kiedis, he just starts pulling everything out of the picture, and he takes a hose and he starts having a water battle with the rest of the band. And that's when I learned, you don't tell the Red Hot Chili Peppers who they are.
Yeah.
They'll tell you who they are.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how submissive, you know, even A-list celebrities will get. If you have an idea, like it's a powerful thing when you're holding a camera. It's amazing. You know, but with Key and Peele, like they were kind of brand new, like they were hot, but they expected me to have an idea. And I'm like, well, why would I come up with, I mean, you're the comedians. Let's talk about this. And that to them was very refreshing.
Oh, interesting.
So, but
you know, voice.
But that might be part of the comedian thing, is they don't want you to be funnier than they are. Plus, you know, it's a certain personality.
Yeah. No, I think I always got the idea that the comedians were saying to me, like, we're not clowns. Like, we're not going to, like, do something.
I'm not going to dance around like your monkey. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So another question here. What has been your scariest moment as a photographer?
Got to give this, you know, Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of them. Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols. I'm actually hired by him, not a third party. Like MTV or VH1, they hire me to shoot him. You know, he's doing this thing with one-way glass, and they're showing a test audience his show that he's going to be doing, and they don't know he's in there. And it's this horrible little room, but like not horrible in a good way, like horrible in a you couldn't make it work way. And I say to my assistant right off the bat, this is going to be a rough shoot. I get the feeling. And I get out of my car and I'm like, okay, why don't we set something up totally away from him? We'll bring him in 3 minutes, he's out of there. Yeah. And I walk into the room and, you know, I'm like, okay, hey man, you know, how you doing? And I'm going to make this as easy as possible. You know, I'll do it somewhere else. That way I'm not bothering you. And I'm going to quote him. So it's a little vulgar, but he says, you know, I'm not fucking moving anywhere.
Ooh.
And I'm like, oh, okay. I leave to go get my gear. I call my brother and I'm like, he's doing the punk rock thing. He's playing the total. And my brother goes, there's only one way you're going to get a good picture of him. You got to piss him off. So I'm like, okay. So I go get my gear. We go back into the room. It's this tiny room. I got the camera down on the ground. I'm like looking up so I don't have to see the room. And he looks at me and he goes, you're going to make my fucking legs look huge. And I don't even look at him. I just look at my assistant and I said, this was a scary moment for me. I turned to the assistant and I said, "Hey, give me a wider angle lens so we can make his legs look even bigger and show how ugly of a room he refuses to leave."
Wow.
And he just looked at me with a little sparkle in his eye, and he says to me, "You fucking cunt." And at that moment, everything was fine.
You're kidding
Like
me.
as soon as I challenged him, everything was fine. That was a scary moment. There's been having an African American assistant, being a Jewish guy, going into a small town in South Idaho, and then there's nobody in the bar except a couple people. And then you realize they're not serving us.
Oh, wow.
Like that's not on set, but I wouldn't have been there if not for the camera.
Right.
You know, a lot of things have happened. Photographing crystal meth addicts. You're put in a situation where you want them to take the crystal out, yet you know they're going to incriminate themselves. They think you're the press that's here to like get them out of trouble.
Yeah.
And you're pushing them to like, yeah, let's check it out. And then they want you to try it. And you're like, you know, that was a weird moment.
Yeah.
Anthony Kiedis was probably one of the scariest moments I've ever had. When he said, Dr. DeBakey, it's a shame. The guy who's first open heart surgeon, he was fine, but he had a PR woman that came on to me. It was unbelievable. That got scary because I thought the whole shoot would collapse. I'd say the scariest part of being a photographer is when you're setting up, you look at your watch, you realize the subject's going to be here in 15, 20 minutes, and you are just not ready.
Oh, yeah.
And that is like the worst feeling in the world. And I feel it regularly.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I feel it regularly. And that's a horrible, horrible feeling.
It is. Who was on your bucket list to do a self-portrait with for your series? And that's from Dana Fox.
It'll never happen, but Bob Dylan. I was going to say Lou Reed, but he's gone now.
Mm-hmm.
So Bob Dylan.
That's good. He's been a little more public lately. You never know.
Yeah, he's got, it's a good
He's got
new
the
record.
music out. He's writing statements and stuff like that.
Yeah.
From Jean-Claude Audet, what is your favorite Lou Reed song?
When, today?
Yeah.
I'm a huge Lou Reed fan. I can't answer that one.
It's hard. It's hard with someone who you might hold so high, where it's more about the whole body of work rather than like a favorite song, I think, or something.
Okay, here's what I'll say about Lou Reed, and is his work, and this relates, bringing a little full circle here to the self-portraits, is, I don't know, according to he's very blunt and potentially abusive.
Oh yeah.
He's definitely had problems with substances. And when you listen to his songs, they seem so autobiographical, but I don't really know that they are. And I sometimes think about that with self-portraiture is, to me, because of that comment from my brother about, well, you're not really a janitor. I've always wanted it to have some level of accuracy, but how much do I really want to tell? And how much am I implying, how easily you could lie, especially in today's world with Instagram. It'd be very easy to construct, these narratives about yourself that just aren't true. So Lou Reed's music has always been very interesting to me lyrically because of that. Bob Dylan's lyrics always feel like they're exactly about what's happening in my life at that moment. Even though it was about my life 20 years ago, it can't still be about my life. But that's what's so great about his work is it's cryptical enough that it has much more of a universality that at the end of the day, I don't think people want to look at self-portraits or any photography and learn too much about the artist. I think at the end of the day, we're all fairly self-absorbed creatures that when we look at imagery, movies, songs, we want to think about our own lives, and that's what's going to have holding power with work.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. I always thought Lou Reed's stuff was fiction writing. Like he was trying to essentially be a fiction writer, and he was very good at it. And like one album would be about death, you know, and then another one would be about something else. And I mean, I guess I'm thinking of the later stuff. I always thought it was like, you know, like writing a book myself, you know.
No, well, I think you know, he always said he wanted to write the great American novel and make it a rock song.
Yeah.
But wow, it seems like he's talking about himself. Like it's hard to separate it.
Hmm.
You know, and I think self-portraiture, again, this idea of, you know, where I'm teaching right now, that, you know, it's a new idea to me, this idea of the performed self-portrait. And I'm at odds to know whether that's a redundant term or not. And I will say it has gotten me thinking about self-portraiture in a bit of a new way. It's just something I always assumed it was performed. It had to be. I still think there is no other way. But I'm not, you know, if I'm not wearing the fudge kitchen, that, you know, I hope to never be able to answer these questions entirely.
Yeah. Yeah. When you mentioned that,
It's what keeps it interesting.
yeah, when you mentioned that phrase to me, I thought it was just like some art lingo that, you know, I didn't give it a lot of value myself because I just kind of felt it was so easily dismissed or something like that. But I don't know, maybe
I'm in an environment with, you know, people that I respect, and it was a new term that was said that I'm still thinking about.
Yeah, right. Trying to grasp.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. Back to my class here. Juan Correa, do you have a question? Oh, gotta unmute yourself. Oh, there we go.
Have you ever had a scam photography assignment in your career? Yep. And I'm embarrassed by it. Very embarrassed. I got screwed less than a year ago
Really?
when the fader, you know, because everything's changing, right? And suddenly, you know, I don't know if you guys know the fader. The fader is like a hit magazine based out of London. And the fader contacts me and they want me to do this fashion thing, which I'm not a fashion guy, but that's why we want you to do it. We're looking for kind of, you know, it's just for Instagram. And they send me a check and they hook me up with the producer. You're shaking your head. Has this happened to you? Yeah.
That was my question.
Yeah. I've been 22 years into this and they got me, you know, and I thought the check cleared, but it just meant that my bank trusted me enough that they put the money in the account. The actual check hadn't cleared. Mm-hmm. And then $4,000 later, I, you know, I'd always somewhat prided myself on that never having happened to me. Yeah. And the only time I ever didn't get paid was because the magazine declared bankruptcy, and good luck. But yeah, no, be careful, all you know, everybody, because, you know, I think I know what I'm doing. I've never thought I was a great business person, but, you know, I can handle my own, and totally got scammed. And then I called up the fader and they said, oh boy, you're another one of the photographers that got screwed, aren't you? Like they knew right away. So who knows how many photographers fell for this.
The way they send you the paperwork, it's so original, because they sent me the contract and everything, and then I had to call the company. Nobody would pick it up. Then they gave me the reservations for the hotel as well in Texas. Then I called the hotel and they were like, we don't have any reservations, but they were still sending me the checks and contracts and everything. So eventually I just said no.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I wish I had. Yeah, so yes, to answer your question, that's the one time that I know of that I was scammed. It hurt. It was a tough pill to, it just, you know, it hurt my ego. I felt I knew too much to have that happen to me, but yeah, it happened. You know, so be careful out there.
That's hard. No, that was, I mean, and it's also more prevalent when things are desperate. Like now, you know, when there's no economy, it's easier to get taken advantage of because you want these things to work out, you know, and you're bored and you're just like, well, let's just give it a try. So no, it's
plus, as a, you know, compared to a lot of you guys, you know, as an older photographer, you know, I always have to put the money out for the hotel. The airline, no, but the hotel you put out, you're buying every meal for you and the assistant. And, you know, will Condé Nast pay me back? Yeah. Will Time Inc., that doesn't exist anymore, but will they pay me back now that they're Meredith? Yes. So I never got, I was never scammed before. I always kind of knew who the client was, but there was always some level of faith.
Right.
These were people that were pretending to be, and it was elaborate enough that they had fake Facebook pages of the producer that I supposedly talked to. It was elaborate enough that I realized this can't just be for $4,000. This must be $4,000 times 100 photographers out there that are all scouting, looking for the cool fashion story that they're going to do. That hurt. Yeah. So be careful out there. Good
That's
question.
hard. Yeah, that was a good question.
Yeah.
Juan, Korea, you were going to ask a question?
Yeah, so I was just kind of curious what performative self-portrait means to you and how that might differ from your personal work.
Are we going back to that term, perform self-portrait?
Yeah, because that's the first time I've heard of that term. And so my project that I've done through my MFA is self-portrait, but I've never heard of that term before. So I was just hoping that you could maybe elaborate on it.
I kind of can't because it's not my assignment. I mean, I should talk to my fellow professor who assigns that, and my guess would be that he would have a more elaborate explanation for why it's being called that. When I heard it just bounced around, I'm brand new teaching where I'm at. When I heard that term bounced around, I felt a little like, have I not done my homework? Like, so I don't know if that is considered an actual term or if that's in the context of just the term of an assignment.
Gotcha.
But it has made me very interested, the idea of it, just because I've always been working under the assumption that every self-portrait's performed. I never thought about it in those, in those words, but to me it was a given. But I also set everything up to begin with. So, not to speak for the other professor or the students that have had that assignment, I would think Cindy Sherman. You familiar with Cindy Sherman? I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely.
Particularly all of them actually. I would maybe consider them performed because she does not, I think, consider them pictures of her personal life or who she is. I don't think she expects the viewers to find out any more about her. I think it's more about the way the female icon has been portrayed in media and all those type of
the
thoughts.
postmodernist.
Yes, my take on it for self-portraiture is it's always just been, it's just my life. But yes, you could argue they're performed. My dad's behind the camera, my brother's behind it. Now that I got the SRL, there's a self-timer, but there's generally there's somebody clicking it. So I'm performing. The only way you could truly have a non-performed self-portrait to me is I did a job once where in the beginning of, I think, internet dating, people would hire a photographer and give them their schedule for a couple days where they knew they would be, and they would like lurk and take these candid pictures of like, the writer was, she hired the guy to do it, and she went to a cafe with her friends, and he's lurked, she's never met him. That to me would maybe be as close to it, but that's not a self-portrait.
Right.
So that's a candid portrait by somebody else of that person. So it's something I'm going to pursue, defining that more. There's definitely an interesting conversation to be had there about this particular assignment that's handed out at my school that I teach at Ithaca.
Yeah, sounds interesting.
That's good. Oh, let's see. Tiffany Griffith, did you have a question?
Hey, yes, I put a question in there about what type of gear you use right now, Michael.
Canon 5D. When I first went digital, I bought a $16,000 leaf back for my Hasselblad, thinking, hey, I'm a pro. I would never do that again. I like my 5D. I use Dynalite strobe just because they're a hell of a lot cheaper than Pro Photo. That's about it. Strobe lighting, 5D for the most part. If it's a
Do you
big
use
ad gig,
different-
I've rented a medium format house.
Oh yeah.
But I would never get to put at the time 2008 leaf back on a 1974 Hasselblad. It seemed like a good idea, but it didn't work out so well.
Yeah, I tried that too.
Yeah.
What about lenses? Like, what's your go-to?
So I used to shoot, my kit was a field camera for 4x5 and a Hasselblad. And then I got the leaf. What happened was I went digital because I was on a shoot and the photo editor was there and they asked me to do something. And I said to her, the estimate's going to have to go up because of the film. And something came up and she said, well, this was 2008 and this was Fortune magazine. And she said to me, you're probably one of the only photographers that is still shooting film. And there was nothing cool about that in that context. Like, you want to make a living, like, suddenly they want they want the edits sent from the airport. Like, so I quickly got this digital back thinking the easiest way would be use the camera I'm used to with the lenses. I only had prime lenses my whole life. There was something uncool to me about zoom lenses. So then I didn't really have a backup camera except for the film backs and some 120 film. So I quickly decided maybe I should get one of these 5Ds as my backup camera. But I had such a hard time with the leaf back on the Hasselblad with focus that I started having to use a tripod to keep things in focus. So suddenly the leaf back Hasselblad became like the field camera, and suddenly the 5D felt more like the loose Hasselblad. So I ended up gravitating immediately to the 5D, and I only bought I bought the kit that had the zoom lens just because it was never supposed to be, it was just going to be my backup camera. And I did buy a prime lens. I bought 2 prime lenses. I end up using that same zoom lens all the time.
Interesting. Did that answer your question, Tiffany?
Yes, yeah, it did. Thank you.
And Lightroom and Photoshop is my lab. I use them both equally.
Mm-hmm. Yvonne Williams, are you still there? I know you had a question that I can read it for you if you aren't able to come, but are you able to come?
I see.
Let me look for her question. Yvonne's question was, what are your expectations for a photo assistant? Like a
photo assistant?
Yeah.
First thing that popped in my mind, if you're going to be late, don't show up with a piping hot, brand new coffee. Like, what the hell's going on in your head when you do that? Secondly, don't be late.
Yeah.
That's a pet peeve of mine. I give myself enough time to not miss the flight, not miss the shoot, but I don't like to, so be on time. Don't pretend to know something that you don't know. Be quiet enough on set that your presence is, like, I have very little amount of time to create a micro relationship with my subject. If the assistant gets too involved in that process, things can fall apart. If an assistant has an idea, please share it with me. Don't be offended if I don't take the idea, but I'm always open to the idea. I worked for a guy in Philadelphia way back when who would be having a hard time. How do I get rid of the shadow? He'd show me the Polaroid and say, well, I don't know, maybe we should move that's stupid. I'd be like, and I remember thinking, well, guess what? I could have helped you out on your picture, but now you're not going to get the help. So I'm always open to help, but you also have to know when to back off the assistant. And this is both literal and symbolic. First of all, I recently landed in Vegas from a shoot, and we are going from the plane to the luggage. And I asked the assistant, which luggage conveyor belt? And I'm thinking, well, why are you here? I mean, that's kind of the job, is the gear. And then this is the more literal and symbolically, if the better shot is on the second, or better yet, if the better shot is on the third floor and there's no elevator, and I'm torn between the shot on the first floor or the third, if I get the sense the assistant wants to do, I think the first floor shot's good because they don't want to lug the stuff up the steps. That's it. And you can tell. And the assistants that are, I think, it's a pain in the ass, but that pretty cool shot up there. And the other big thing I'd say about assistants, and I learned this again from the guy that I worked for that I hated, and I don't use that word lightly, especially if you travel when you work. You might work for 3 hours from the time you get to the set to the time you leave, but you might be together for 36 hours. You probably are going to eat all 3 meals together. You got to get along with your assistants. My assistants have generally always been friends. As I've gotten older, I'm friendly with them, but they used to literally be very close friends of mine. Don't pretend you know something that you don't. Does that help? Whoever asked that?
There
you go.
Yeah. I think that we can probably wrap this up. Does anyone else have questions for Michael, who has been very generous with his time and told us all his secrets? Juan, did you have something else you wanted to discuss?
No, but I'm really impressed with your work.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Deanna Sortino, do you have any questions?
So I'm a high school photo teacher, and I do assign a self-portrait versus selfie kind of lesson with my students. And they hate taking pictures of themselves. So unless it's like the selfie. So what would your advice be for those that don't like the camera?
Well, the advice I would give for good self-portraiture will actually push them away from this, which is don't be so concerned about taking a flattering picture of yourself. Unfortunately, that's going to push them the other way. That's why those pictures that my mom saw of me when I started internet dating, she was like, you're nuts. To put these pictures, they're not flattering. I'm like, yeah, but they're awesome, But I think every photographer, I think it's hard to argue with the fact that if you want to be a portrait photographer, that you better stay in touch with what it feels like to have it turned around on you. Because, I've done a lot of photo shoots. I've also done a lot of self-portraits. And it still just feels weird. And it's healthy for photographers to remember how weird of a process having your portrait taken actually is. So I would recommend, if you feel weird, that's good. It gives you a certain level of empathy. Every time you approach photographing somebody else, remember what that feels like and try not to, that was another thing that did motivate me, was when my buddy Jim with the Slurpee cup said that, I figured, wow, if my new goal is to not be flattering, I better see what it feels like. And actually felt pretty good. It allowed me to use some of my insecurities as an asset, actually. So that's something that I would say. It's a good way to work out your insecurities. perhaps. I hope that helps you.
That's great. No, that's great. Great advice. I think that we can let you go. I know it's late there. This was kick-ass. This was better than I thought it could have been, and it was a great way to start the semester. And for anyone who missed this or stepped out, it's going to be archived, and we are going to post it to the Academy of Art blog once they kind of put it all together and edit out whatever they want to do to clean it up. So, Michael, thank you. This was super.
I would like to you, Tim, and to all of your students, say truly to have you ask me is an honor, because I've been a fan of yours since the late 90s.
Yeah. No, appreciate it. Appreciate
it. Truly. So when you asked me, I was flattered.
Oh.
And happy to do it.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Have a great week. I'll reach out to you a little bit, but thank you. We will let you go, and then my class, take a 10-minute break, recover from how awesome this was, and then come on back and we will talk about your projects. Sound good? Thank you, guys. All right.
Thanks,
see you,
guys.
Michael. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, dude.